This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
Everyone wants to talk about what failed Nick Reiner. The revolving door of rehabs, a medication that was reportedly changed a month before everything collapsed. And I get it. It is easier to blame the system than to look at the person standing in the middle of it. But here's the part that nobody wants to say out loud. What if nothing failed Nick Reiner? What if Nick Reiner simply refused to let anything work? Nick failed Nick Reiner. Because when you look at the documented record, not speculation, not tabloid gossip, but Nick's own words across nearly a decade of interviews and podcast appearances, a pattern emerges that has nothing to do with system failure and everything to do with the man who built his entire identity around being the victim of people who loved him. 17 or 18 rehab stays, depending on which interview you believe, reportedly unlimited financial resources, two parents who, by every account, spent years trying to save their son, and it allegedly ended with both of them stabbed to death in their Brentwood home while their 32-year-old son was taken into custody hours later. At what point do we stop asking what went wrong with the treatment and start asking what went wrong with the thinking? We're going to get into all of this. Before we do, be sure you are subscribed to us on Apple Podcasts. If you're not already there, hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. If you're not an Apple Podcast user, we're everywhere else too. Spotify, you name it. Find the podcast platform, hit subscribe so you can take us with you on the go outside of our video platforms. If you're only on the audio, check out our video. YouTube, leave your comments there. And also Substack, hiddenkillers.substack.com. We are there. We are giving you access to all of our content a day before it goes live everywhere else. We're building a lovely little community there where people are having conversations about these cases, sharing their stories, sharing their experiences. It's really wonderful. Come join us. It's absolutely free right now. hiddenkillers.substack.com. Nick Reiner told NPR in 2016 something that should have been a red flag for everyone who heard it. He said, "I am a spoiled white rich kid from a Hollywood family, but I think it's even more of a testament to how powerful drugs can be that you don't care about any of that stuff." You recognize it, but you don't care? Really? He framed his privilege as proof of his powerlessness. The more he had, the more it supposedly proved how sick he was. This is textbook cognitive inversion. Taking every advantage and reframing it as evidence of suffering. This is how these manipulative little fucks work. And it works beautifully as a manipulation tactic because it preemptively deflects any criticism. What do you say to that? Oh, good point. Wow. And in some cases, yes, it is true. But it's not a blank canvas or a card that you can have carte blanche to do whatever the hell you feel like and go, it's the addiction. How can you believe someone who had everything and still couldn't get better? It must be the disease. It must be the system. It can't possibly be him. It can't possibly be his choices. And when he kept telling himself that and the system around him kept reinforcing that idea, you get Nick Reiner. He weaponized privilege as victimhood, and people bought it, including, apparently, his own parents. Nick talked openly about wanting to expose what he called the ridiculousness of rehab. He didn't frame this as someone with legitimate concerns about treatment modalities. He framed it as someone who viewed the entire apparatus of people trying to save his life as a joke, or worse, as an attack on his own autonomy. And here's where it gets genuinely dark. In 2015, Nick co-wrote that semi-autobiographical film called Being Charlie with his father, Rob Reiner, directing. The film portrays treatment counselors as obstacles, depicts the father figure as emotionally distant and complicit in his son's suffering, and puts the blame for failed recovery squarely on everyone except the addict himself. Nick got his famous father to direct a movie that essentially blamed Rob Reiner for Nick Reiner's problems. During that press tour, something remarkable happened. Michelle Reiner said publicly, "We were so influenced by these people. They would tell us he's a liar. He was trying to manipulate us, and we believed him." And professionals told Rob and Michelle that their son was manipulating them, and Nick successfully convinced his parents that the professionals were wrong and he was right. The family publicly apologized to Nick for listening to doctors instead of their drug-addled son. This is the playbook. Addicts often manipulate families into distrusting medical professionals. Nick didn't just run that play. He got a feature film made about it. And his parents funded it, produced it, and promoted it alongside him. I mean, just think of that. One of the most revealing things Nick ever said publicly about his periods of homelessness, he told People magazine in 2016, quote, "If I wanted to do it my way and not go to the programs, they were suggesting I had to be homeless." He wasn't forced into homelessness. He chose it repeatedly in Maine, in New Jersey, in Texas. He chose sleeping on the streets over following someone else's rules. And the way he tells it, you're supposed to see this as principled resistance. A man refusing to submit to a broken system. Oh, how noble he is. But look closer. He knew the safety net would never disappear. He knew that when he was ready to stop playing homeless, his family would be there. He could dip into the misery tourism of street life, collect the credibility of having roughed it, and return to Brentwood whenever he got tired of the performance. "I spent nights on the street. I spent weeks on the street. It was not fun," he told People. Then why did he keep doing it? Because following rules, any rules from anyone trying to help him, was more intolerable than freezing and living on the streets. It's not principled resistance. That's narcissism in survival mode cosplay. 17 or 18 rehab stays by the time he was in his early 20s. Let's think about what that actually means. That's not treatment failure. That's someone learning exactly how long to stay, what to say, and how to satisfy concerned parties before checking out and doing whatever he wanted. On the Dopey podcast in 2016, Nick openly admitted he still used weed and drank alcohol while claiming sobriety from heroin. He called abstinence-only frameworks black and white thinking. That didn't work for him. He reframed his unwillingness to commit to actual sobriety as philosophical disagreement about treatment methods. He wasn't relapsing. He was practicing harm reduction. But here's what the harm reduction crowd doesn't want to acknowledge. For someone with Nick's documented history of violence, psychosis, and escalating behavior, "I'll just smoke weed and drink but not do heroin," isn't a treatment philosophy. It's a negotiating tactic. It's keeping one foot in the door of the life he wanted to live while claiming credit for the recovery he refused to pursue. When facilities held him accountable, he got kicked out. Reports indicate one stay at a notoriously strict New Jersey facility ended after 6 months when he was discharged for attitude problems and dropped at the Salvation Army shelter. The system didn't fail him there. He failed the system. And then he made the system's response to his behavior into more evidence of his victimhood. The relationship between Nick and his father is where the cognitive distortions become impossible to ignore. Nick said publicly, I didn't bond a lot with my father." And being Charlie, the character based on Nick, delivers a line during a talent show. "My dad's a piece of shit. I don't have a joke. I just wanted to say it." Nick co-wrote that scene. He wrote it about a character based on himself in a film his father was going to direct, knowing his father would have to shoot that scene and sit in an editing room listening to those words over and over. Rob Reiner wasn't absent. He wasn't neglectful. He was building one of the most celebrated directing careers in Hollywood history, while also, by every documented account, showing up repeatedly to try to help his son. Far more than folks who don't have that demanding of a schedule, he was there for his kid. This wasn't a man who disappeared into work and abandoned his family. If you look at any interview with the man ever, and they talk about family and they talk about work, Rob is always the first to say about work, none of that matters. Yeah, it's fun. It's great. It's a part of me. My life, what makes me, what fuels me. I'm just paraphrasing here. It's my family. The love his family gives him, the love he gives his family, the time they spend together, the bonding. That's what mattered most to Rob Reiner. All this was icing. This was not an absent father ignoring his son. This was a man who was having a career and a relationship with his son who seemed determined to make both impossible and then play the victim. But through the broken prism of Nick's thinking, his father's success became the villain. Because it wasn't his success. It wasn't Nick's success. And if someone else is having success around him, then that immediately makes him feel bad. And it's how narcissism works. He couldn't compete with it. He couldn't match it. He didn't even try. He just threw the towel in it. I can't do this. So he made it the source of his suffering. Rob Reiner's accomplishments weren't something to be proud of or inspired by. They were proof that Nick would never measure up, and therefore proof that Nick was a victim of circumstances beyond his control. Oh, the humanity, you poor piece of shit. And the manipulation worked. Rob spent years publicly apologizing. He told the LA Times when Nick would tell us that it wasn't working for him, we wouldn't listen. We were desperate, and because the people had diplomas on their wall, we listened to them, and we should have been listening to your son. No, you shouldn't have. You honestly just should have let him go and die on the street because that's what he wanted to do. But I don't think Nick would let himself die on the street either. It wouldn't work for the manipulation. He had to get out there just long enough to come back and go, oh my gosh, it's so horrible. It's so horrible. This is bad. Oh my gosh, I'm suffering. Let me live in the guest house. Take me back. Okay, I'm great. You're so successful. Yeah, that success is what kept you alive for 32 years. They should have let you die behind the dumpster at Lowe's. They should have. The world would have been a better place. They would have still been alive. Everything would have been better. It would have been sad for them losing their son. The rest of the world really wouldn't have cared. Pretty much useless to 99.99999999999. Let's just say 100% and call it even of society. You don't matter at all. Nick, you don't. You've accomplished nothing. You've been a pariah to society. You're really kind of a a poster child for, the morning after pill. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know what way to say it. Maybe it is unfortunately. You had parents that loved you, and you used that love and weaponized it. Maybe they should have hated you. Maybe then you would have gone off on your path and ended it sooner. I don't know. But you probably wouldn't have ended up here. Unfortunately, love is what brought you back. Love brought you home. With a weapon. Nick successfully made his father feel guilty for trying to help him. That's not a failure of parenting. That's a masterclass in emotional manipulation by someone who had decades to perfect it. In 2020, Nick was reportedly placed under a court-ordered mental health conservatorship under California's Lanterman-Petrus Short Act. This is the mechanism reserved for individuals deemed to have a grave disability due to mental illness, people who cannot care for themselves and require involuntary psychiatric treatment. It is different than Brittany's. Brittany's was a financial conservatorship. This is different. It's the LPS conservatorship. When you hear that, you hear LPS, that's the Lanterman-Petrus Short Act. That means it's controlling your well-being, your medication, if you need it, all of that. You're gravely disabled. We've talked about the gravely disabled thing on other videos and how much of a joke it is, because the second someone feeds you, you're no longer gravely disabled, then you no longer qualify for the system. But I digress. If you want to learn about how screwed up this system is, there's plenty of videos that we've already done on that. Conservatorship lasted 1 year. A licensed fiduciary in Los Angeles County oversaw medical decisions, including psychiatric medications. Reports indicate that while the medication was initially effective, it had to be changed due to the side effects. The conservatorship expired in 2021, and here's the cruel systematic reality that families across this country understand too well. Once Nick was a legal adult, even wealthy, well-connected parents eventually hit a wall. California's patient autonomy laws meant that absent a conservatorship, you cannot force treatment on an unwilling adult. The same laws designed to protect people from involuntary commitment became the mechanism that left the Reiners with no legal tools to intervene. Reports indicate that another conservatorship was reportedly in the works at the time of the murders. The system was trying to catch up. It was already far too late. We need to address the medication change because it's going to become the explanation that lets everyone feel better about what happened, right? Reports indicate that Nick was being treated for schizophrenia and possibly schizoaffective disorder. His medication was reportedly changed approximately 1 month before December 14th of 2025. Medications can destabilize. That's real. Anyone who has watched a loved one navigate psychiatric medication knows that finding the right combination is brutal, imprecise work. Changes can trigger episode. Changes can remove barriers that were holding back dangerous impulses. But here's what the medication narrative doesn't explain. Based on his own admissions, the capacity for rage was nothing new. On that Dopey podcast back in 2018, Nick admitted he went 10 rounds in his parents' guest house while spun out on uppers. He said, "I started punching out some things in my guest house." He destroyed property. He punched walls. He smashed a TV. His parents reportedly told him to leave. This wasn't a man who was stable until a medication change made him violent. This was a man with a documented pattern of violent outbursts who was barely being contained by medication in the first place. The medication change may explain the timing. It doesn't explain the 17 years of cognitive distortions that built the psychological architecture for what allegedly happened that night. The night before Rob and Michelle Reiner were found dead, the family attended that party at Conan's place. According to reports, Nick was seen arguing with his father at the party. Some sources describe it as loud enough for others to hear. We don't know what they argued about. We may never know, but we know that every family member who loved Nick had at some point been on the receiving end of his rage, his demands, his manipulation, his insistence that they were the problem. The family friend who spoke to reporters after the murder said something haunting. They did everything for Nick, every treatment program, therapy sessions, put aside their lives to save Nick repeatedly. "I have never known a family so dedicated to a child," said one friend. And this still wasn't enough, because nothing was ever going to be enough for someone who had made victimhood the core of his identity. If you're listening to this and you recognize this pattern, not from headlines, but from your own family, I need to say something to you directly. Some people cannot be saved. Not because the system fails them, not because the resources aren't there, not because you don't love them enough, not because their families don't love them enough. Some people cannot be saved because they have built their entire identity around not being saved. They have made victimhood so central to who they are that any attempt to help them threatens the only self they know how to be. This is what happens when mental illness becomes an excuse instead of a diagnosis. When we don't actually treat mental illness, we put them in 72-hour holds, 28-day stays. And then when we actually need them to get the help for the mental illness, there is no lever the sane people can push to help them get it. Because the crazy person is saying, "I don't want that." And the law says, we better listen to the crazy person. When addiction becomes an identity instead of a condition, when the people trying to save you become the enemy simply because they want you to live, love is not enough. Rob and Michelle Reiner loved their son. They loved him through 17 or 18 rehab stays. They loved him through homelessness. They loved him through violence and manipulation and public humiliation. They loved him enough to make a movie that blamed themselves for his failures. They loved him enough to let him live in their guest house till age 32, even after everything he'd put them through. And according to the charges filed against him, he allegedly stabbed them both to death. Nick Reiner had every advantage a human being could ask for: wealth, access, a family name that opened every door, parents who refused to give up on him, a support system that bent over backwards to accommodate his demands while he spit in their faces and called it progress. And through the broken prism of his own thinking, he turned every single advantage into evidence of his suffering. His family's success was a burden. Their love was conditional. Their interventions were attacks. Their forgiveness was never enough. The Reiners didn't fail Nick. Nick failed the Reiners. Every treatment center that tried to hold him accountable, he rejected. Every professional who tried to help him, he undermined. Every boundary his parents tried to set, he demolished. And every time he hit bottom, he found a way to make someone else responsible for putting him there. That's the broken prism. That's the cognitive architecture of someone who allegedly rather destroy the people who loved him than to do the work of getting better. And somewhere out there right now, there's another family living the same nightmare, watching their own loved one construct the same victim identity, watching themselves get blamed for trying to help, wondering if anything they do will ever be enough. It won't be, because for some people, enough doesn't exist. There is no amount of love, money, treatment, or forgiveness that can save someone who has decided that being saved would cost them the only identity they have. The Reiners learned that the hardest way imaginable. The rest of us have to decide what we're going to do with the lesson. Give me your thoughts in the comments section on our Substack, hiddenkillers.substack.com, or on YouTube. Love to hear what your thoughts are. Please hit subscribe wherever you're getting our podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube right now or wherever, take us with you on the go in podcast form. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, you name it, we are there. Go to your podcast player, press subscribe on Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. We do greatly appreciate that. And if you have a moment, leave us a review there on Apple Podcasts. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments section. Until next time, my name is Tony Bruschi. We will talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.